welcome to this panel, which is basically going to be discussing climate threats and small island nation, except that my own view is that climate threats today endanger everybody. And it is nobody, no one community's isolated problem, because climate-induced issues, whether there be problems of migrants, people moving, any kind of devastation, actually spills over into various domains. So it is a threat to everybody. And we're very glad that today we have a very well-known figure, President Nasheed, who actually brought into focus, drilled it into global consciousness, the fact that for certain vulnerable populations living in small island states, climate change was an existential threat. It was not something abstract. It was not something which would happen in 2030, 2040, 2050. It was happening every day, and they were living the consequences. And that focus on mitigation, yes, but even greater focus on how do you adapt? How do you transform lives? Became a very important focal point during climate negotiations. So welcome, President Nasheed. It's a pleasure having you here. My first question to you is, now you've been involved in the COPs all along. That you were at the Glasgow COP, and you've been very vocal saying that any hopes of sticking to that 1.5 degree target seems a very distant dream. And today in 2023, that is being repeated over and over again by professional agencies, so much so that perhaps the feeling is sinking in that in 2023, with all the wars and everything happening around us, the focus coming back on traditional energy security, it seems the Paris Accord was written for a different world in a different time. Where do we go from here?
Well, thank you very much, Joshi. And it's lovely to be here in Cape Town and in South Africa. The war in Gaza and also the war in Ukraine has shadowed many, many very important environment issues. And we must bring these issues back to focus, especially from here, we go to COP in Dubai. I am presently working for the Climate Vulnerable Forum. These are now 58 countries. In 2009, 9 countries got together and we formed the forum. Now in the COP, this forum is now 58 countries and it has become a treaty organization. So we will be a negotiating bloc, and we will, again, will focus on 1.5 degrees. We will focus on adaptation and mitigation as well. Now, how do we bring the focus back on environment? First, now, this is not a problem for the little Maldives in the middle of the Indian Ocean. The amount of people dying in Germany is more than the Maldives through bad weather. We have more than 20 countries who would probably go into default in the next 2-3 years because of bad weather, because of rains, droughts, floods, you name it. So I think your question is how are we going to bring the focus back on the environment? Nature will bring it back on the environment. There will be storms, there will be droughts, and these storms and bad weather incidents would become stronger and stronger and stronger. Right now, we see Gaza on our screens. Everyone is seeing Gaza on the screens. But you will soon start seeing bad weather on the screen. And recently there has been a lot of bad weather on the screen. And I think how we bring back focus to climate issues is nature will do that. I'm very unfortunate that we were naive enough to wait until the worst storm is upon us. And it is upon us. Hopefully this monsoon would be better, but I can't see it becoming better. So we will see the environment in focus. It has nothing to do what I do or you do. It will be India's focus. It will be everyone's focus because nature is doing it. It's none of us. And it will have to come to focus. We will not survive if the world temperatures rise above 1.5 degrees. Now, 1.5 degrees is sacred. Reefs start dying anything above that. Trees start dying anything above that. Swells are higher, waves are bigger, and the rain is more. So it will be a focus. Both of us would not have to do anything about it. Nature and God will do it.
Well, the best thing is nature having a seat at the negotiating table. But I don't think that is going to happen. Ultimately, how do the vulnerable, the ones who are most at threat because of climate change, improve their negotiating position at successive COPs?
Thank you. You see, we, as I said, the Climate Vulnerable Forum would be a negotiating bloc now. It's hopefully not going to be G77 in China. So it's these 58 countries would vigorously negotiate for 1.5 degrees and for better protection of the environment. So we have this, what we call the climate prosperity plans. These are low carbon development strategies that would give you the same economic outcomes without trashing the planet. So it would call for better irrigation. It would have more techniques on how to survive, on adaptation. It would call for nature-based solutions. And this, we will make sure that we survive. And we cannot, I mean, I've been going to, as you mentioned, I've been going to COP for the last so many years. The only thing, the good result that has come out from the last COP, I saw COP children. So negotiators had got married to each other, and now we have COP children, but nothing else other than that. But we do need a legally binding agreement that all sides agree to, and we must get this agreement. Okay, the Paris Agreement was supposed to be that agreement, but it's still not a legally strongly binding agreement. So we need that agreement among ourselves for us to survive. It's very sad that everyone thinks that this is a Maldives problem. No, it's a Manhattan problem. It's a problem for every country. Just imagine, a quarter of the world's population live on low-lying areas, in coastal areas. Now, if they start migrating, and if they go on the move, we will panic. We saw what happened when 1 million Syrians started moving. Fortress Europe locked everything up. And the same thing is going to happen when bad weather hits you. So the question is, when would you leave your home, deciding that you cannot live anymore here? So I think that is, that unfortunate time is coming closer and closer to us, while we are still naive and talking about so many other unnecessary things. We will bring this issue to the focus, and nature will have a position in the negotiating table, because these climate vulnerable 58 countries have no other choice other than that. They are debt-ridden. They can't pay back their debt because bad weather is upon them. And bad weather keeps on destroying every production, every infrastructure that they build. So you see, these 58 countries took a loan to build a house, to build a school, to build a bridge. And the bad weather has taken away the bridge, the house, and the hospital, but the debt remains. So we are now paying 20% of our income on debt repayment and 30% on adaptation. And so you can see that we have no money now for health, education, recreation, and many, many other things that we would need to survive as a prosperous country or people. Yes, we need a position in the negotiating table, and we will get that. we will make sure that we have that position. We're not going to just stand around and say, okay, we didn't have a position. We didn't get a position. We will make sure that we have that position. And I think vulnerable countries coming together, understanding their strength, wanting to negotiate on their behalf, will make sure that we have that seat. And I'm sure India would also assist us in getting that seat.
So let's start thinking about what kinds of instruments. I mean, start talking of debt restructuring. Debt restructuring in favor of countries which are actually having to adapt, which are actually giving the world the lungs to breathe. When you start looking at this, are there certain instruments which are being thought of? There's a lot of talk going on about blue bonds. I know there are lots of other instruments being talked about, but are there practical examples on the ground? Do you think there's a hope for them, or are these headed the way of the ESG initiatives?
Now, both Sri Lanka and Ghana are trying to restructure their debt. Seychelles has recently done it, and Seychelles is a very good example of a debt to environment swap. So basically, what these countries are saying is, we have the trees, and for you to breathe, you need our trees. So we have your lungs. These industrial nations, they have cut down their trees long time ago, 200, 300, 400 years ago. And when you go on the train in England or anywhere in Europe, you would see vast areas of grassland and farms, which used to be thick forest. We now have the trees. And what we are suggesting is, please swap our debt to environment protection. We will look after the trees. We will have better management plans. We will get carbon sequestration. We will find the science on how much ton of carbon would be sunk into one tree. So how much would you pay for my tree? I think we have better assets than anyone else, because you will not breathe without our trees. So the blue bonds is not working right now, especially because I think we are selling a tree to two people. So get the science right, get the maths right, and make sure that these forests are properly looked after, properly managed, and also therefore traded in carbon bonds. This doesn't have to be traded in European countries alone. It can be done in southern countries as well. And I hope that a debt to environment swap becomes a IMF prescription for debt structuring. Now, IMF is still a little bit reluctant to bring in environment swaps when restructuring debt. They call for austerity. And when you go into all this austerity, finally, yes, your debt becomes sustainable, but your country is no longer, because there's another riot. So we are talking about prosperity. And debt to environment swaps are pathways for prosperity and debt restructuring without going into all the austerity and therefore another riot.
Let me take you to another subject. There was when you spoke about the threats to small island states. There was a lot of talk at that point of time about investing in properties elsewhere for people to migrate. Today, the focus seems to be shifting. Today, we are talking of geoengineering projects. We're talking of land reclamation. We're talking of pouring concrete into perhaps the oceans, into coral reefs, to be able to create an environment, fortress islands, where people can move and live in their own localities. Do you think that's a solution?
No, I don't think that's a solution. I don't think pouring concrete over nature is adaptation. And I don't think another few millimeters of steel is going to save the planet. We must bring nature-based solutions. For instance, in the Maldives, it costs us $3,000 for an embankment, $4,000 a meter of water breaker. So 1 meter of coastline is $7,000. We have 2,000 islands. So this is just completely impossible. But to grow a reef, it's $25 a meter. The problem with the reef is it grows very slow. So we need more science into genetics of the reef. We need to find a resilient coral that would survive higher temperatures. And I'm sorry, we need to genetically modify it so that it can survive the future to come. Building, trying to work against nature is not going to save you, but we must try and work with nature. The present idea of adaptation is concrete. And that's not a way of going about this. I am convinced that it's not working in the Maldives. It's not working in anywhere that I have had a look at. But if you do grow a reef, and also if you have proper grass cover, for instance, on your soil, that would work against mudslides, landslides, and floods, and so on. So more nature-based solutions and less concrete will save the planet, and that is going to give us prosperity, not the concrete. I don't think the concrete is going to save us.
When you look at, say, South Africa, when you look at Africa as a whole, when you start looking into neighbors across in India, what is it that you expect from, say, country like South Africa, from countries like India, to be able to better your negotiating positions, to be able to take concrete action, which takes care of the most vulnerable on this planet and moves the ball forward and not backward on this whole game where we are stuck in?
So first, science. We want your science. We think that there's a lot more science to do in coming up with these nature-based solutions. So South Africa, India, Brazil, these are now very rich countries with a lot of money and a lot of universities, a lot of bright students. And so one thing that we would be asking from you is the science to survive and to spend more on finding these new methods of working with nature. And also during negotiations. Now, unfortunately, this G77 and China bloc, China has an ambition of 2 degrees. 2 degrees will kill us. Now, how can we partner with someone and negotiate for our own suicide? I think this sounds extremely silly. So, unless and until you agree to 1.5, we can't work with China. This is extremely impossible. Now, we had a look at India's ambition, South Africa's ambition. When we add everything together, it survives around 1.5 degrees. And so we can work with South Africa and India and Brazil, but anyone who talks about 2 degrees is a no-go area. So that is primarily why the Climate Vulnerable Forum has come into form, and we have decided to become a negotiating bloc. We will negotiate, hopefully, during this COP. And your question is, what can you do? Please agree with us. Please don't argue. Please agree to 1.5. We will not survive without 1.5. South Africa, Brazil, and India, Indonesia. These are big economies, big countries, and they can really assist us in surviving. And we can find solutions. So our ask would be for you to back 1.5.
So as far as the new group is concerned, which you, and this is, thank you for sharing it with us, what was going to be a strategy of this negotiating group. What would you be demanding, say, and at the next COP?
Well, again, I've been going to COPs for a long time. I don't think I want to talk about loss and damage anymore.
Okay.
You could go on talking about it until you become blue in the face. Someone mentioned 100 billion today also. This was agreed in 2009 to me actually, in Copenhagen, that rich countries would pay $100 billion a year for adaptation and mitigation. But this money never came. And I can't see this money coming anytime soon either.
So how do we move beyond this now? We are in a logjam.
Okay.
Money is not going to be coming. How do we create
The private sector.
okay. So tell me more about that.
So the Climate Vulnerable Forum countries have a lot of state-owned enterprises. And these are huge things that are making extremely bad decisions and very good losses. And, there was one conversation that they had here in the morning. The South African former finance minister, now the governor of the central bank, he was saying that the state is actually against the private sector. They are against the private sector because they love their state-owned enterprises, which has probably a bigger budget than the national budget. And you can dish out jobs and you can dish out many things for elections through a state-owned enterprise. But one thing that we would like to see now is these enterprises to be privatized and private money coming into climate vulnerable countries and assisting our economic systems to benefit from their investments. If the CVF countries, the Climate Vulnerable Forum countries, can decide to sell a part of their, or privatize part of their power plants for renewable energy, that is, then I think there is a way of a revenue stream coming into us. We also want to trade in carbon. We want to ask the 58 countries, how much of your forest can you put into a fund? And how much of this fund can be used to trade and for the communities of the forest to benefit from that? So I think the forest fund and the privatization effort of Climate Vulnerable Forum countries can give us some amount of funds for us to survive.
Thank you. We're just running out of time, and I want to take some quick questions from the floor.
My name is Babalom Tingi, a member of SASCO. The reason I stand here, former president, is just to understand that.
So you have to speak to your mic. The president was very, very upset that no one was speaking into the mic.
Oh, am I audible? Oh, okay. So, former president, my question is very brief. That one thing that has become a summary of the conference we're in is that change is an inevitable force. But then how do we ensure that the change that we want to see does not become a rupture change, but a transition? That we need to understand that as African continent, we faced what we call colonialism of a special type. So how do we then transition the change so that it is sustainable and meets the requirements that we face as Africans, and that it does not become a rupture which is harshly brought upon our people with no substantive force or substantive ways that we can actually mediate that change? So how do we ensure that change is a transition rather than a rupture?
How do you get into a sustainable transition?
You see, most of our state-owned power companies are actually older than our own countries. Like Ceylon Power Corporation, Maldives State Electricity Corporation, any of these power corporations are bigger, are actually older than our own countries. So unless we find a transition plan for labor in these existing state-owned enterprises, there will always be pushback from them in bringing the new technology. The new technology has not come to us primarily, I believe, because of our own state-owned enterprises pushing it back. Not because there are people who do not want to invest, not because we don't have the science, but the state electricity company in the Maldives, the people who are buying spare parts for it, fuel for it, lubrication oil for it, all sorts of things for it, are very, very, very powerful. And they are entrenched in our governments because the state-owned power company is older than the government, than the country. So we need to find a transition plan, labor transition plan for the state-owned enterprises.
Thank you very much. My name is Mara Fayal. I work for the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And I would like to pick up on some of the themes we had yesterday about the G20 and BRICS and the representation of the Global South in these fora, because, of course, the main forum of negotiation for climate is the COP, and you have your own bloc in there to negotiate, but you do not at the moment have the same seat at the table in G20 and BRICS. So I would like to ask from that perspective what your expectation is regarding particularly the G20 and the BRICS on climate, and whether you consider that partners from the Global South adequately take on board your interests as small island development states. Thank you.
Two things there. From BRICS, from G20, 1.5. Another thing is, it's not only my problem, it's your problem as well. It's not just the Maldives which is going to sink. Everyone else is going to sink with us. So please don't marginalize this issue by saying that this is a problem for the tiny little Maldives in the middle of the Indian Ocean. No, this is a problem for the planet. And from G20, 1.5, and you know, I am encouraged because most of the European countries are aligned with that. So is India. So, you know, half the work is almost done. So we need the US and China. How can we do that? By shaming them. We can't bomb them. But, you know, they can bomb us, but we can't bomb them. But the only thing we can do is shaming them. It is utterly shameful what you are doing.
So that is dot on time, I think. Thank you, President Nasheed, for those words, putting climate action back on the agenda at the next COP, bringing it center stage, and working with the G20, with the BRICS, with every other coalition possible, to bring it center stage, not get diverted in a very difficult and troubled time. I think that is a message we need to send and take back from here at the Cape Town Conversations. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely being here. Thank you.